Coki Nieto throughout the quarters, semis, and final combined had 12 unforced errors, which just sounds absolutely insane. And that was 1% of his shots.
Even though he could be the most important part of that pair or the main reason why they've won this week in Bordeaux, I think he couldn't have done it without the stellar support from Jon Sanz. I mean, in the final, he was obviously the best player.
What I really like about Nieto and Sanz is I almost feel like there's an X factor to them, and I feel like their ceiling is quite high, and that's probably because of Jon Sanz. If we find ourselves a Jon Sanz like in the final where he's really prolific and he's hitting the winners, then I feel like the pair can really challenge anyone.
The reason why Coki and Jon and Garrido and Yanguas are right there, and I genuinely think they can compete with both the Superbibes and Paquito and Lebron throughout the season, is because they're both both pairs, and I'm talking about Coki Nieto and Jon Sanz individually and Garrido and Yanguas individually, are probably in the best form that they've ever played.
And probably one of the sort of main and biggest shocking news that we've seen over the last 24 hours in paddle is that Maxi Sanchez and Sanyo Gutiérrez are splitting up. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Paddle Pod, your weekly podcast covering professional paddle, presented by Hugo and Gonz. We're on to episode 55, and as always, joined by my co-host Hugo. It's great to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Gonz. Great to be back. Hi guys, hope you've had a great week, and yeah, just really looking forward to this episode and then logging off and being back on court with my partner. So you, Gonz, I hope you're ready for this evening's match. We won another win after yesterday's win, right?
Yeah, exactly. We've got to continue the streak. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it as well. Very ready.
Lovely. But yeah, maybe we should stop talking about us, given that I don't think many of our fans care about our personal performances.
Yeah, maybe one day we do make it some local amateur tournament or something like that. They might, but yeah, I agree with you. I think at the moment, we should probably keep it to ourselves.
It would be great. Imagine setting that up. I know our colleagues from Paddle Up, one of the other kind of main paddle podcasts out there, did something similar where they've kind of organized a few Paddle Up quedadas, so meetups with fans. And I think they did actually organize a tournament at some point. So it'll be really fun. Who knows? Maybe if our numbers keep rising and we fancy taking the time to do so, I mean, I'd love it.
Yeah, that would be a great plan for sure.
Indeed. So yeah, maybe we should crack on with today's episode and the main topic that we wanted to discuss, which is obviously the Premier Padel's Bordeaux P2, which took place last week in obviously Bordeaux in France. And as our fans know, the top 4 male pairs didn't play. So it was a great opportunity for the best of the rest, i.e. all the other pairs, to make a name for themselves, make a statement, and really kind of catapult their seasons in the right direction, potentially with a trophy. Obviously, there's only one pair that can go away after each tournament with the trophy, and that doesn't necessarily mean that all the other pairs haven't had a great week. But yeah, great week of paddle. And Gonz, maybe it would be great to kind of get your initial thoughts on the level of the tournament overall, in terms of how you felt the players' levels were compared to other tournaments, and yeah, maybe just a few kind of standouts.
For sure. Yeah, I thought the level overall was good. I wouldn't say that it's the best paddle that I've seen, but nonetheless, it was still a really fun tournament. There were still some very close matches, and there were still some very good players playing. So I think overall, I was quite satisfied with the tournament. I thought that for me, the main standout has to obviously be the winners, Coki and Jon. It's their first title. I think their first sort of major title at pro level for both of them. And they've earned it. They've been working so hard ever since they got together, and they've been sort of knocking on the door. They've been right at the footsteps and really competing with the top players. And as you mentioned, they sort of made a statement for themselves in this tournament, grabbing that title and a very convincing final win against Momo and Álex Ruiz. In particular, I want to highlight Coki Nieto, which has been outstanding throughout the tournament. It is true that in the final, Jon Sanz was definitely sort of the leader, and he played better, he had more winners, and he was sort of like really the one taking most of the risks. But I felt though that throughout the whole tournament, Coki Nieto was sensational. I'm going to read you one stat which just kind of blows my mind, and it's from the stats themselves of Padel Intelligence. But I saw another account on Twitter sort of do the workout to get this, which is called Padel Metrics. They also do post quite a bit about data and Padel in general. But Coki Nieto throughout the quarters, semis, and final combined had 12 unforced errors, which just sounds absolutely insane. And that was 1% of his shots. At Premier Padel, the average is 3.5%, and the lowest that we had seen at a tournament was Chingoto with 2%. I believe it might have been Santiago. But 1% of your shots throughout quarters, semis, and final, it's absolutely ridiculous. And in one match, he had, I think, 27 winners and one unforced error in the whole match. Now, I can't remember if it was the quarters or the semis. It definitely wasn't the final. But it's just like insane, like absolutely insane. And he actually reminds me a bit of like a modern Bella. And I kind of say that because, I mean, he's been thrown the Bella comp before, but he's got the modern feel. Like the game, we know it's faster. He's very fast. He plays very fast, but he works the point constantly. He's relentless, and he sets himself up to have like then an easy shot and an easy winner. And something I think as well that we've seen him be more aggressive this season. I think he's started to become a bit more attacking and a bit more offensive. And I think that's a great development. He obviously still needs to work on that. That's probably the main thing that he needs to work on his game. But alongside him, he's got the perfect partner in Jon Sanz, who offensively has all the shots. And I really liked in the final that even though sometimes what we say about Jon Sanz is that, oh, he forces it too much, he's throwing too many unforced errors. But I kind of like that he went for it. I feel like that's kind of what you need, and that sort of character and personality of a player to actually go out there and really produce the shots that you need to win a game. And if one or two smashes don't go in, it doesn't matter. I'm still going to try the third and the fourth. So yeah, perfect combo, to be honest, in between both players, and incredible to see them win their first major tournament. And yeah, pretty flawless performance. And I'm going to leave it now to you, Hugo. There's a bit of things that I want to comment on, but I feel like I'm just rambling on now. So I'll give you the space to chat as well.
To be honest, I think we're done. I mean, you've basically commented everything there is to comment, so we may as well sign off and say goodbye until next week. No, well, actually, I just wanted to take the opportunity to very quickly mention that Qatar Airways are now the title sponsor of Premier Padel. And it's great to see how brands are investing more and more money in padel and the sport. We know how important that is for the growth of the sport. And obviously, padel is very much at a stage where it needs that investment to continue to grow so that the conditions are better for players, so that more players can make a living from padel. And we know how, there's a vicious circle between investment and growth of the sport. So it's really important we continue to see that. So great to see that after being on Coelho and Tapia's shirts last season, Qatar Airways are now, the title sponsor, the biggest investor in Premier Padel, although I'm sure Red Bull are investing a lot, given that they are a main sponsor and also broadcast all the matches from quarterfinals onwards. But yeah, moving on to the actual week in Bordeaux. Yeah, I mean, obviously the main highlight has to be Coki and Jon, as you said. Those stats from Coki are unbelievable. I know that he's Mr. Consistent and Mr. Insurance, and I know the number of unforced errors he produces every match is close to zero, but I didn't realize it was that amazing. And I didn't realize that this week in Bordeaux was basically a record. So hats off, because he's been sensational this season, as you say, and as we've mentioned throughout previous episodes. he's also adding that aggressive side to his game. I think there was a lot of times before when you could see that kind of ball that floats midair and you're not sure whether you just play a safe shot and go for a bandeja and keep the point going, or you take the risk, go for a smash, and you could get found out of the net. And Coki used to be the player that 95% of the times he'd just play the safe shot and keep the point going, which obviously plays to his favor because he's so fit, so fast around the court. And I think the longer the point goes, the better it is for players like him. Now he's actually going for that smash and going for those winners. And it's definitely paying off. So great to, unbelievable form in Coki Nieto. And I think even though he could be the most important part of that pair or the main reason why they've won this week in Bordeaux, I think he couldn't have done it without the stellar support from Jon Sanz. I mean, in the final, he was obviously the best player, as you just mentioned. His total score, contribution score, courtesy of obviously Padel Intelligence, was 17.6. Coki Nieto's was actually just 6.8. So you can actually see that there was quite a big difference, quite a significant difference in the final. Jon Sanz produced 20 winners and 13 unforced errors. Very, very solid score for him. And when you compare that with Álex Ruiz, who was the worst performer in the final, who had a total contribution score of minus 10.8, it's a significant difference. And I think it was in that cross-court battle that the match was won and lost, respectively. And I think that was probably the main reason why we saw Jon Sanz take those risks and why he had so much of the ball, because I think both pairs knew that the match up between Álex Ruiz and Jon Sanz was potentially where the balance was falling more from one side to the other. So Jon Sanz knew that if he beat Álex Ruiz in that cross-court battle, they would win the final, and that's exactly what happened. So, great to see them both win their first major trophy, because it's the case for, as you said previously, both Coki Nieto and Jon Sanz. They're both incredibly hard workers. And we were actually talking about this a few weeks ago, right? In one of our episodes, we were talking about what happens if, say, LeBron and Paquito suddenly decided to split, or one of the other top pairs, and some of the lower down pairs ranked between the 5th and 8th positions, were tempted by either LeBron and Paquito, or maybe Stupa and Dineno if they decided to part ways. Would Coki Nieto and Jon Sanz be one of the first pairs to break up? And maybe after this week, it's no, they're not, because they've won their first trophy. And I think they've confirmed themselves as, have they confirmed themselves as the best of the rest? What do you think, Gons?
Well, despite the fact that they did win the tournament, I still feel like Garrido and Yanguas are above them. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see that matchup because that would have been the quarterfinals of this tournament. But Yanguas and Garrido had an absolute stinker against Ramiro and Chisco, and so they lost out in the first round. But sometimes it happens, right? Padel is really competitive. Even a pair like Ramiro and Chisco, who actually both of us do quite like them. But let's face it, this season they've been really, really poor. They haven't found that consistency, but they are players that can definitely beat you, and they can definitely beat like top players like Garrido and Yanguas. So it happens. There's times where the top sort of pairs do have matches where they just like disconnected or whatever, and a loss in general obviously can happen to anyone. So I don't want to overreact, because I still think that their body of work this season proves that they just like really up there. And in terms of the race, they're actually the 4th best pair. So, it just speaks how well they've been doing this season. So I don't want to overreact too much, but I do think it's quite interesting. And I do feel like it would be it would have been a very good matchup to see in this tournament, and in sort of the conditions of the court, which wasn't like extremely fast, but it wasn't like super slow either. It was like a nice mix, I would say. But yeah, what I really like about Nieto and Sanz is I almost feel like there's an X factor to them, and I feel like their ceiling is quite high, and that's probably because of Jon Sanz. If we find ourselves a Jon Sanz like in the final, where he's really prolific and he's hitting the winners, then I feel like the pair can really challenge anyone. And we've sort of seen them. They've beaten Paquito and LeBron a couple of times now. Whereas when I look at sort of the other pairs, I don't necessarily see that they've got this sort of potential. I almost feel like their ceiling is just set. And with Garrido and Yanguas, I would place them in the same bucket as Coki and Jon. I feel like these two pairs, from what we call the best of the rest, have like a way higher upside and a much higher ceiling than the rest, where I feel like Álex and Momo, for example, or Tello and Bela, for example, I just don't see them ever like really beating the top pairs. And I can definitely see Garrido, Yanguas, Coki, Jon beating the top pairs. Even though it might not happen every day, I can definitely see them challenging way more.
I totally agree. I think this tournament, at least in my eyes, has confirmed that both Coki Nieto and Jon Sanz for winning the tournament, and Yanguas and Garrido for their previous tournaments and the whole season that their whole season so far are a level above the other pairs, so all the lower ranked pairs. And I think the main reason why they're above both Álex, Ruiz and Momo González and Tello and Bela, who are probably the most immediate chasers, is because both Bela and Tello and Ruiz and Momo have a weak link in the pair at the moment, who, at least in my eyes, are Bela in Bela and Tello's case and Álex Ruiz in Ruiz and Momo's case. I mean, firstly, Álex Ruiz, and let's just put into perspective that Ruiz and Momo made the final this week. And actually, I thought they played really well throughout the week, particularly Momo, I thought was outstanding. I saw a stat online. I can't remember whether it was actually courtesy of Padel Intelligence or someone else, but it included winners versus unforced errors throughout the whole week in Bordeaux. And Momo was number one across all the players, ahead of Coki Nieto and Jon Sanz. So Momo had a truly sensational week in Bordeaux. And I thought Álex Ruiz had a great week as well. I mean, they beat Bela and Tello in the semis, who are obviously, they were the number one seeded pair, and that's always for a reason. And he's clearly progressing he's progressing a lot, and he's getting closer to his best, but I still think he's far away from it. And it's probably due to the fact, mainly due to the injury that he's suffered this season and that he's still lingering on with. He actually recently did an interview with, it might have been Analistas Padel, maybe a different channel, talking about his injury, saying that it's been a very strange injury. Didn't really know how serious it was at the start, and he still has it, and he's still not 100%. So I think that's the reason why Momo and Ruiz aren't managing to, the main reason why they didn't manage to win the final and compete with Coki and Jon is because of that. And I think looking at Bela and Tello, we've already spoken a lot about Bela's current form. He's obviously struggled a lot with injuries throughout the last year, probably even more. And he's not very comfortable on court. And funnily enough, you would expect a player like Bela to, when the really key moments and key points in matches arrive, to be, given that he's so experienced and he is the GOAT, to handle them the best. And I'm just thinking about their semi-final against Álex Ruiz and Momo González. The first 5 points in the deciding tiebreak in the first set were unforced errors from Bela, basically. Maybe not all unforced errors, but mistakes on his side. And you could see how much he was suffering on the court. So I think the reason why Coki and Jon and Garrido and Yanguas are right there, and I genuinely think they can compete with both the Super Pibes and Paquito and LeBron throughout the season, is because they're both in, both pairs, and I'm talking about Coki Nieto and Jon Sanz individually and Garrido and Yanguas individually, are probably in the best form that they've ever played, the best moment in their careers. And I don't think that's the case with with the rest of the pairs, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think on Bela's side, so true. Like, I think the thing that's always been so characteristic of him, which is the low amount of unforced errors, is kind of the thing that is now his demise, because he is committing so many unforced errors. And we've seen it in the sort of graph that we always sometimes put with winners and unforced errors, and I'll make sure to include this so our viewers can see. But he's now like quite high in terms of unforced errors, and we know that he doesn't necessarily bring in a lot of winners. And with someone like Tello, who's basically gonna be the person that needs to win the match, and because of that, he's going to take a lot of risks. And so that means that there will also be a lot of unforced errors that will come with it. He just needs to be like rock solid. And as you mentioned, that tiebreak was crazy because he basically threw it away. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe they were 4 or 5 nil down, like something crazy like that. And they managed to come back, and they did manage to come back, if I'm not mistaken, 6-0, and then they ended up losing 8-6 overall, the tiebreak. But still, you if you're giving yourself away at 5-0 or 4-0 at a tiebreak, like you're basically going to lose it. So it's definitely something that he needs to work on, because it's always been sort of the main characteristic of Bella, just knowing that he's going to be so solid and he's not going to commit a lot of unforced errors. And I think he can, because unforced errors are not necessarily they're unforced, right? They're not demanding. It's almost a bit of a decision making, and potentially if he finds himself a bit more comfortable on the right, then he'll start making less. So I do think that it's something that can be worked on. But in terms of speaking about, for example, Teo and Bella, with regards to the top guys, I still feel that Bella will always be that sort of, would be the sort of limit to the pair, because you have to take into account his age. You have to take into account how he is physically. He's not going to be able to compete at the level that Galan and Chingoto and Tabian Coelho and the Super Pibes require, right? And this is by no means a knock on Bella. I mean, it's just nuts that he's still competing and he's still making semifinals at age 41, if I'm not mistaken. So it's just it's Father Time, Father Time is undefeated, unfortunately. And
if I'm not mistaken, Gons, he's actually 45.
45, so, Jesus, yeah. So there you go. I mean, it's ridiculous, really. And then on Álex and Momo, to be fair, I was actually quite not pleased, because obviously it would have been amazing for them to win the tournament as well. But I wouldn't say I'm disappointed by their performance. I think one of the things that came into my mind, which is something that you've mentioned to me before, is they haven't had any stinkers. And I think that's so important. They're just showing, it almost feels like they never split. And to be honest, they should have just never split. It feels like they're just gaining that consistency back. And the fact that they made the final, I think, is a good performance from them. As you mentioned, Álex Ruiz has told that he has this sort of lingering injury, and he's mentioned that he's the one that sort of is not playing as good, and he's mentioned that Momo needs to be a bit patient with him because he's still finding form. Now, I don't necessarily think maybe that's why they lost the final, and I still think that the problem with Ruiz to me seems more mental in general rather than this sort of injury, because we've seen them as well in the past. And for example, with Teo, so many times where they would break, but then they would get broken back straight away. It even happened in this final as well with Momo in previous finals. They still didn't manage to pull it through. So sometimes I feel like Álex loses his focus a bit, and I feel like sometimes he's quite nervous in general. So in terms of them, if they really want to progress, I kind of want to see Álex improve on the mental side of the game. But a really good performance from them overall. They made the final, as I said, and they've been really consistent. So I'm quite hopeful on them to be a consistent quarterfinal pair. Now, I'm not sure they will continue to making semifinals if everyone on the tour is there to play, but they're definitely one of the top pairs for sure.
Yeah, I just think they're going to be one of those Mr. Consistent pairs, like basically what Ruiz and Teo were last season, and the main reason why they ended up as a fifth seeded pair at the end of the 2023 season. Just I think both Álex Ruiz and Momo are players that are normally a 7 out of 10 in every match. They're rarely a 9 out of 10, but they're never a 4 out of 10. I know Ruiz didn't have the best final. I think that was also due to the fact that he hadn't been playing a lot. And so when you make the run to the final at a tournament, you played like 4 days in a row. He looked very tired. And particularly when you're lingering an injury, that must be pretty tough. And also when you're playing against two absolute work dogs like Coki Nieto and Jon Sanz, who just tire you out. I mean, that's their game. The longer the point, the better for them. So I think, yeah, all in all, a really positive week for Ruiz and Momo. And I think that their season, this could be a turning point for their season, in my eyes, just to, well, hopefully, particularly for Álex Ruiz, for his confidence, because I think he's a super emotional player. We've seen how, well, he shouts on the court and he's very expressive. And we haven't seen him be as happy on court as he has been throughout his whole career. I mean, he's one of the most loved guys on tour because he's just so nice. And even on social media, I saw that he'd posted on Coki Nieto and Jon Sanz, well, victory posts on Instagram talking about the trophy. And he was saying, well played, guys. So he's a really loved player, but I haven't seen that happiness on the court that I think he needs to be at his best, probably due to his injury. I mean, that would be my guess. So fingers crossed he gets back to his peak, because when he's at his peak, I mean, he's invincible, at the net. He's honestly, he's like a warrior up there. So if he has a player like Momo González who just cleans up in and around the court and defends as well as Momo does, I think they can cause some damage against some of the top pairs, and they will most likely not be losing and won't be having many stinkers against the lower ranked pairs, at least in my eyes.
And what are your thoughts of Yanguas and Garrido exit? Do you think it's something or nothing?
I mean, if I had to bet, I would say nothing. I think everyone can have a bad day. And to be fair, it went to 3 sets. I mean, yeah, both sets that they lost were a break difference, if I'm not mistaken. The set that they won was a 6-1, which was the first set, I believe. So it's just, it's just one of those days. But my big question with them is, given how emotional they are and given the arguments that they've had, well, during matches, they're both, well, particularly Yanguas is very vocal about his feelings and he's very happy to have a go at Garrido or just, constructive feedback. Well, he's very happy to give that to Garrido, and Garrido sometimes hasn't taken it as well, probably because sometimes the tone of the feedback has been pretty aggressive, at least in my eyes. I'm wondering how that's going to affect them mentally, now that obviously this week we have the big Rome major, which is obviously one of the only 4 majors of the season, and it's key for players to do well in it, due to mainly the points that it's worth. I mean, it's worth double the points of a P1. It's equivalent to a Grand Slam in tennis. So it's really important for pairs to do well in this tournament. And they've just gone away. Well, they've come from losing a first round match against a pair that, well, Chisco Gil and Rami Moyano have really struggled to win matches over the course of the last, I'd say 12 months, pretty much. So we'll see how it affects them mentally. But I mean, I do think that right now they should still be considered the best of the rest, given the paddle that they've been playing, given how well they've played against the top pairs. They beat the Super Pibes. So I still have a lot of hope in them, and I still think they're going to continue to do well. But what I would say is, if they don't do well in this tournament, they have another stinker or they lose against a lower seeded pair, then that could really cast some doubts in their minds. What do you think, Gonz?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, I'm not worried at all. I think it's more nothing than really something. You sort of said as well, anyone can lose, right? So, and you can have one of those bad days at the office. The score line was pretty close, and in the first set, they did sort of take it away quite easily, 6-1. So you can definitely have a bad day in the office. That's happened to the best of us, really. And
the worst of us.
And the worst of us, exactly. But funnily enough, that you do mention the sort of main thing that's sort of been lingering around Yanguas and Garrido, which is sort of the scenes that we've sort of seen in the bench, especially relating to Yanguas and how he sometimes gives feedback to Garrido. I'm not sure if you've seen, but El Cuarto Set released an interview with Yanguas like 24 hours ago. So it was very recent. I actually watched it this morning. And Yanguas was surprisingly open about this whole situation. Like he very much acknowledged that this is something that is an issue, that is something that he needs to work on, and that is something that he basically needs to fix, and they need to essentially improve on going forward. I was quite surprised, to be honest, that he was going to be so open about it. I thought that it's the kind of thing where maybe internally you obviously try to fix it and speak about it, but externally you maybe don't necessarily say to the whole public, like, hey, I know that when in the changeovers I'm like telling him things in a really bad way and he doesn't like it. Maybe you would brush it off as kind of like, well, we're really good friends and this is how kind of we speak to each other and we've got great confidence, so it's fine. But I mean, it was surprising to see, but I guess in a positive way, because Yanguas clearly acknowledges that there's a problem and he's trying to find a solution. He's trying to work on it. So I do think that going forward, hopefully that does improve, but it seems like it's sort of the main thing, because from a paddle perspective, there's really no reason for them to, I guess, split or not. To split. So if there are these sort of, I guess, maybe more relationship kind of issues, and then if we've got Paquito and Lebron sort of lingering there, and maybe Lebron calls Garrido like, hey, do you want to come and play with me? I mean, it would be quite a tough decision, I'm sure, for Garrido, and quite a difficult conversations that he would have to have potentially with Yanguas. So yeah, we'll see. But I'm positive, and I did like to see Yanguas sort of say that, even though if I was in his place, maybe I would have kept it more internal rather than external. But fair play to him.
I actually have watched that interview, not a whole of it, but the majority of it. And yeah, surprised that he's been so open about it. But to be honest, I think it's really good, because, I mean, we've seen Juan Lebron potentially not be as open about it, but he's struggled with pretty much the same issue that Yanguas is struggling with, being maybe, I would say, or people could say, not the best teammate, giving your teammate a few weird stares when he makes a mistake on the court, giving him a bit too much feedback, sometimes not that constructive during the changeovers. But we've seen that Juan Lebron's continued to be the player that he is. So I think Yanguas, well, personally, and in my eyes, I genuinely don't think that this is affecting their performance on the court. I think Yanguas is just that way. I just think he's that kind of player. He's very emotional. He's very vocal. He's very transparent. And we've seen that Lebron has been very similar throughout his whole career. And he's managed to be the best player in the world for 5 seasons, if not more. So I don't think that has to affect them. I don't think that's affected their level on the court. Well, him and Garrido's, the pair's level on the court so far. And it shouldn't necessarily affect it going forward. It's just that, as you say, it could affect their personal relationship. And that could then just, well, spark Garrido to take the decision to say, hey, even though we're playing really well, I can't deal with this anymore. Because to be honest, that's exactly what Galán did at the start of the season. Lebron obviously lost his head a bit in one of those games. And that was the point when Galán said, I'm splitting. Even though after they came back following Juan Lebron's serious injury throughout the start of last season, they were probably the best pair, better even than Dabian Coelho, and they won the first tournament of the season. So yeah, I guess we'll see what happens, but it's great to see that he's open, and it's good that he acknowledges it. I guess that's the first step in changing the way you are.
Yeah, exactly. And something which I'm going to move on to our next topic, if that's all right, Hugo, because I think we've talked about Bordeaux enough, but I kind of see it very much related to this whole Yanguas and Garrido dynamic. And probably one of the sort of main and biggest shocking news that we've seen over the last 24 hours in paddle is that Maxi Sanchez and Sanyo Gutiérrez are splitting up. And I don't think this is confirmed yet, but I mean, it's pretty much almost like official that Sanyo Gutiérrez and Arroyo are going to be teaming up. And I say that it is kind of similar with the Yanguas and Garrido dynamic, because it's almost, you feel like, well, what happens if Lebron calls Garrido? Is that sort of, would that have the same outcome essentially? But we've seen now Sanyo actually teaming up with someone much younger, with someone that has way less points, but he's taking a risk. He's actually been so vocal before in interviews about protecting his ranking and the fact that he didn't want to climb up all the way. But now I don't want to say he's taken his words back, but I'm a bit shocked, but I think in a positive way. I kind of like that he's taken this risk. I never really bought the whole just protect your ranking, even though you're with someone that you know that there's a ceiling to your game and that you're not necessarily going to improve and you're just there to hold out. So I really do like this move from Sanyo because I think it speaks volumes about his motivation, because he could have stayed with Maxi and he could have been like, making some maybe like quarterfinals sometimes and then maybe losing a couple first rounds and always sort of like trying to get easy draws because of their ranking. But now with Arroyo, he's really actually taken a chance on someone who has a lot of like high potential in his paddle. He's incredibly offensive. We've seen he's one of the best smashers in the game. He's always been at the top of the sort of winners graph in terms of percentage of winners. Now, there's obviously a side to him where he still needs to be a bit more stable. He needs to learn, but hopefully being with someone like Sanyo will give him this experience. So I really do like the move. I'm not going to lie. Now, do I think that they're just going to be absolutely amazing and go out there and light the world on fire? Probably not, but I kind of like this bold move from Sanyo. What do you think, Hugo?
I'm going to be probably quite ruthless. Firstly, I actually don't think that the ranking or the points is now something that's a big consideration, because I was just checking Maxi's points and Arroyo's points on the FIP rankings. There's a difference of less than 300 points. Maxi's on 2,400 and something, and Álex Arroyo's on 2,100 and something. So I almost think that Sanyo's just played it because he's seen that Alonso and Arroyo have consistently made the quarterfinals this season. They've challenged some of the top pairs, and obviously Arroyo's having a great season. And you would, in principle, when you look at their styles of play, you'd think that they work really well, because what Sanyo probably needs is someone who finishes off the points quickly for him, a young guy who's really aggressive, given that he's more of a technical, more patient player on the court. So I can see his thinking in terms of how their styles fit. But yeah, I just think that he's taken the opportunity and he's taken the decision because he's seen that actually the point difference is very little. And he thinks that, well, going forward, Arroyo will probably do better with him than how he would fare with Maxi, which I don't know whether that will be the case. I guess we'll see. But actually, when I was trying to think about how I think they're going to do, I don't think they're going to do very well. Genuinely, I just have a feeling that I understand why Arroyo would say, hey, yes, I'm going to play with a legend of the game and learn so much from Sanyo. But Sanyo's clearly, this could very much change, but I think he's on his way down. And Edu Alonso is a great partner for Arroyo. I mean, he has everything that Arroyo doesn't have, and they were doing really well this season. They were being really consistent. So I know they didn't have a great week this week in Bordeaux. They lost early on, and there were probably high hopes on them, and they had high hopes for themselves. But that's basically been their only bad tournament all season. So I think we've seen what's traditionally happened, or we've seen examples of when young players say, okay, let's take a chance and play with an experienced player to learn, and it hasn't gone well. For example, when Augsburger and Libak split, and they played separately, and they actually didn't do very well at all separately, and now they're back playing together and playing really well. I don't know why I have a feeling they're not going to do well. I just think that Sanyo's not in a great moment in his career. I don't think that playing with Arroyo is suddenly going to change that. And I think Arroyo mentally is still a bit unstable. And I don't think Sanyo's the perfect partner for him in that sense, because Sanyo sometimes loses his head a bit on the court. He's quite vocal with his feedback. He kind of criticizes his teammate without, well, just quite openly. So that's my initial feeling, but hey, I may be wrong.
Well, it'll be interesting to see anyways. I think it's one of those pairs that you turn the TV on to watch, because I think they'll be very exciting. I think for me, though, they definitely have a higher ceiling than Maxi and Sanyo. You just know that Maxi and Sanyo max they're ever going to reach is quarterfinals. And even that, they've been struggling to do so. For example, in Bordeaux, they didn't even make it there. So I can understand why Sanyo was like,
Agreed.
It's just never going to really work with Maxi. And who knows, with Arroyo, could I have that one tournament where, 4 or 5 days we're playing amazing, the court conditions are exactly the ones we want it to be. I know that Arroyo can win us matches. I don't know, maybe the stars align and they could have that one fantastic week. But with Maxi, I just don't think that it was ever going to happen. In general terms, though, I think that's sort of why Sanyo would go with Arroyo. But what I think in terms of their paddle, I mean, I do agree with you. I just don't see them being really there. I can see them making some quarterfinals here and there, but anything past that would be a massive surprise for me.
No, I totally agree. And hey, I totally understand why Sanyo would make this decision. Sorry, it's just I'm not sure for Arroyo this is the right moment to change pairs because he was doing so well with Alonso, and we've seen how when pairs are doing really well, don't change because we've seen how many times pairs like Momo and Álex when they were playing together, and a few other examples, they split and suddenly it all goes tits up. Sorry for the expression, and something goes well. There suddenly levels drop and everyone starts thinking. Well, they both start thinking, oh, the grass was actually greener on my side, not on the other side. So I guess we'll see. But that's my kind of initial thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. The grass is, I was thinking exactly that. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. And it's yeah, it will we'll see what happens. I do feel bad for Edu because he's been playing amazing and it felt like they had a great partnership. But this is, I guess, it's just the human side, right? And if we think about, I know I'm banging on this, but again, Lebron and Paquito, and if Lebron would decide to call Garrido, they're human beings after all, right? These players, Arroyo's probably looked up to Sanyo, like, he's a legend of the game. He's been number one. There's a human side to it where it's like, I kind of want to play with this player, even though I'm like, I know that I'm doing really well with my current partner. That's just how it is, and for the good and for the bad. But in any case, we'll be watching on to see how they do.
No, and actually, one thing I am thinking is that for Arroyo, even though it is a risk sporting wise, one, he's going to learn so much from Sanyo, and the experience with playing with one of the legends of the game is something that you'll remember forever. But also, his seeding with Sanyo is going to be so much higher because Sanyo is on something like 3,800 points and Edu Alonso is on something like 1,700. So that's a massive, massive difference. So points wise, it makes total sense for Arroyo. So yeah, I get it. I get it from that point of view. I don't know why I don't have the best feeling in terms of how they're going to perform. But for Edu, who knows? As we've seen over the last 24 hours, maybe 48, there's been a few other pair changes announced or rumored, maybe not officially announced. Apparently, Gabra and Chozas are gone. So who knows? Maybe Alonso Chozas. I think that could be an interesting partnership, probably relatively similar in terms of how they could get to play together because Chozas and Arroyo are similar players. I mean, Chozas is obviously more defensive, as in not as aggressive, but he's got a great smash. He's attacking. So I could see them do well. And then obviously, I don't have any doubt that it will be Maxi Sanchez and Lucho Cabra 7.0 version playing together once again. I have that feeling. I don't know about you, Gons, but I'm just convinced that's going to happen.
Yeah, you're 100% correct on that one. And do you agree with me on this, Hugh? I just feel like there's some pairs that are just meant to be. Like you hear their name, you see them, and you're like, they just always meant to be together. Like they should just never split up. Like in every way they match, and that one of them is definitely Maxi and Lucho Capra, and for me the other is Álex and Momo. Like they just
Yeah,
match.
100%, 100%. I think actually their game styles, Cabra and Maxi's game styles match up really well. Maxi is a backhand player who's almost like a forehand player on the backhand. He's defensive, he's consistent, he's more of a counter-attacking player, he doesn't make many unforced errors. Whereas Lucho, obviously, he's a lefty, he's aggressive, he's got a good smash, he takes risks. So I think they're actually going to do well. I mean, normally when they split, I'm like, why are you splitting? You've probably had the best results of your recent career together. So I think they would do well, or they will probably perform as expected if that partnership is confirmed. And what I'm really excited to see is, are more pairs going to split? Because obviously these pair changes always leave players kind of isolated, and there's always kind of a domino effect. So who knows? I'm pretty sure that there's going to be more pair changes, and I wonder who they'll affect.
Yeah, we'll have to see. And once we know, we'll definitely comment on them. But yeah, I think this brings us to the end of the episode. And Hugo, as always, it's been a pleasure to speak with you about paddle. And I hope our audience have enjoyed this episode. And we'll definitely catch you in the next time.
Actually, I just wanted to highlight one quick thing before we log off. We obviously predicted how pairs were going to do last week in Bordeaux.
Oh, damn.
If I'm not mistaken, you said Alonso and Arroyo were going to make the final, and now they've split. Who do you think is going to make the final in Rome? Because I'm going to bet on them to split.
Oh, mate, Hugo, I thought we were not going to do this. I thought I was saved, and I wouldn't have to give any explanations or show my face for my horrible predictions. But my God, yeah, I mean,
I
that was
Garrido as well. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, but you did say Momo and Álex, so you're definitely saved by that. Because I don't think mine could have gone any worse, because they both literally exited first round. Like, I don't think I've ever predicted something so bad, to be honest.
It's so hard when the top four pairs aren't there, though, because it's chaotic. The levels are so much more even. So, yeah. But I guess we'll see. Big week in Rome coming up. So very excited. But yeah, guys, thanks so much for your time. Obviously, please do interact with us on any channel, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, just with your thoughts or anything you'd like to hear or comment or chat about with us. And yeah, have a great week and catch you in a few days.